When police investigators arrived, they found a very violent and brutal attack.
The body of schoolboy Breck Bednar lies in an Essex flat.
Breck is a young gamer. He's only 14 years old. He was on his back with his arms underneath him. It's a very unusual position. He was still bound by duct behind his back. It was unique for myself and for Essex Police, really, because of the nature of the way it was carried out.
This didn't look to be a simple case of murder. He'd had his throat cut, and it was clear that Breck died in a very awful way.
Tried for years to have Breck when I decided I wanted to have a family, and it did take quite a long time. So when he came, I was over the moon.
Breck Bednar was born in London to US citizen Lauren Lefebvre and her then husband Barry.
I say he was my first love and my most important love. And I've said this before, and it's not nice to my husband, but men can come and go, but your firstborn turns you into someone you've never met. They make you a parent, and I loved being a mother.
Lauren, who is a teaching assistant, notices that Breck has a natural ability with anything technical.
He was a clever boy, and as he grew, you could tell that he loved playing and doing with anything that he could build or make or fix. From a young age, he would, if there was a remote control, I'd find him taking it apart, putting it back together, a radio, any sort of gadget. In fact, we sometimes called him Brecky Gadget, because he just would have everything, studying how it worked and how it was put together.
He was smart, he was funny, he was caring, but he was also a typical older brother. He was embarrassed of me at school. He never liked to admit that I was his sister, and I would wave at him and he would be embarrassed, but he was always there for me if I needed.
Right from when he was 8 to 10 years old, he could use a computer much better than I could, and I just lost ground after that and never caught up, but he just had that knack.
I remember Breck playing tons of games online, and me and my siblings were just fascinated by whatever he was playing because he was always the best. He would always win. I just preferred watching. We didn't see any danger to it because we were just so impressed by how well he was playing and how much it made him happy that he was playing and that he had an audience.
His passion was anything to do with computing, and those were the kind of friends that he made within school. They invited him into a gaming group, and for me it felt safe because I knew those boys and I knew their families, I knew where they lived. For him it would have felt comfortable because he had known them since he was young, and that's when he started spending more time gaming online.
Breck has a particular passion for a game called Battlefield 4, and he's playing it obsessively with his friends.
At the beginning, I was happy that Breck was enjoying his friends from school. Because of the divorce, he had to switch schools a couple of times, and I think that's a really hard thing for a kid to do, and I was glad that he was having fun. I could sort of relate to why he was enjoying, the excitement of the games they were playing together.
I remember the first time I heard James's name, and I was just like, oh, Breck's got a friend, and I was all excited. I mean, he had plenty of friends at school, but it wasn't a school friend. It was like a new online friend, which seemed fun because it was somebody not from school. It was maybe somebody from a different area, which could have been exciting.
Breck and his friends play on a server, a private group within the online game they played. It was run by a teenager called Lewis Daines, who is just 4 years older than Breck.
I remember the day, the door was open, he was having a good time, but I heard a different voice than I had heard before, and it was Steve. It was more in charge, it was more in control. When I asked Breck about this new person who I didn't recognize, Breck wasn't worried at all. He said the other boys have been gaming with him for years.
Daines impresses the younger schoolboys with stories about his life.
Lewis Daines told the online gamers who formed part of the server that he ran that he was a extremely successful software engineer who was living a high life. He told people that he fleeted between New York, in Syria, and also that he was working with the US government, and that he was working for Microsoft as well. So he very much portrayed himself as somebody who was a high flyer in the gaming world.
Danes tells the boys he left school early to pursue his dreams.
He's saying that, you don't need to go to uni, you don't need education, look how successful I am, and I made my own way, I create my own success.
Some of the boys soon begin to look up to him as their leader.
I think Danes was, by all accounts, very charismatic. He was articulate, he was funny, he was friendly, which of course would make the online gamers want to interact with him and ask for his advice.
When I would go into Breck's room, the door was open, he had 3 screens, and on one screen was the names of all the gamers, and then the action was in the middle, and then there were pictures of some of the gamers' live feeds. And the thing was, Danes never had his face showing. And so I would say to Breck, well, why isn't he showing his face? And Breck was like, oh, because he does some important work, so he keeps private. I tried to Google him. I couldn't find any photos. I found it unusual that the boys were showing their face, but the person we didn't know was keeping his identity hidden. This person who we didn't know would chat with me, and he'd say, hey, Mom, how are you? I'd say, oh, good, yeah, it's sunny here. What's it like in New York City? He'd say, oh, it's a bit cold. What have you been doing? Oh, I can't really go out much. I'm working all the time, really, really busy. And I'm just thinking, come on, you're 17 years old. You're living in New York City, supposedly, and you don't have anything to say? Like, not a show, not a gig. It never seemed like he was on New York time zone. So I had huge doubts that he was actually in the States, and I always felt like he could have been, 2 streets over. There was only one time that any of the boys saw what Danes looked like, and it was when Breck and one of his friends met Danes on a live stream in a very darkened room, and Danes barely let them see his identity, but they saw it enough to be able to tell that he was actually a teenager like them. And I think that was really a pivotal point, because at that point they thought, Breck's mom is so paranoid. He's not a creepy old guy. He is a teenager like us. And I think they let their guard down then. At the beginning, all of the guys were looking up to Danes and thinking he was amazing.
14-year-old Breck Bednar's mum is concerned about a mysterious gamer called Lewis Danes, who has invited her son to join his gaming server. Records of the group's online conversations show talk was often steered towards the topic of sex.
Lewis was pushing the boundaries, so there will be a lot of dick talk. There will be a lot of talk about calling each other homos, that sort of thing. When you're online, there aren't the normal socialising controls. You could say what you want, when you want, how you want, because there aren't the same sort of consequences. So therefore, things escalate very quickly.
The first time I kind of noticed that something was wrong or something was off was when my mum, my dad and I had gone to pick up Breck from Air Cadets. And we were driving home, it was dark, and I was just in the back. And they were yelling at Breck because I think he wanted to quit Air Cadets or something. Everyone was yelling, saying that Breck was spending way too much time on the computer and spending too much time gaming. And I really took no notice. It just seemed like a typical teenage thing where I understood that parents might not want their children on games 24/7, but I never could have imagined it was something more sinister.
One of the things that Danes did was try to turn the boys against parents with all their rules, So when Breck had joined Air Cadets because he wanted to be a pilot, and he loved it at the beginning, Danes started sort of making fun of anything that was establishment, anything that was organized, anything that you had to wear a uniform, that you had to show up at a certain time.
It's no secret that a lot of teenage children want to disassociate themselves from their parents. They're joining maturity, they're going through puberty, they want some autonomy. So it's a very natural thing for a teenager to want to rebel. But what's unusual about this case is the way that it escalated.
Danes started then to sort of turn Breck against everything, including religion and government. and politics. It was like he was anti-everything.
Disturbed at the influence Lewis Danes is developing over her son, Lauren attempts to confront him directly.
I wanted to see him face to face, like Breck did with his other friends. I wanted to have a face-to-face chat in his room. And I had offered to meet up in person as well in a public place. But Breck said, no, he doesn't want to meet you. He doesn't like parents and he thinks you're too judgmental.
I remember my parents saying, like, why doesn't he want to meet in person if he's legit? Or why doesn't he want to meet the family?
I kept saying to Breck, I want to talk to him. And finally Breck said, okay, he's agreed to chat with you, but on Messenger. We live messaged back and forth. And I remember saying, why are you trying to turn Breck against religion? Why are you trying to turn Breck against school? Why are you trying to pull him away from family activities? And he just would say, well, Breck's a good boy. Why are you forcing him to do things that he doesn't want to do? Why are you forcing him to do things that make him unhappy? Breck's clever. Breck's so smart. He was like telling me about my own son. I got angry because it wasn't getting anywhere. He wasn't answering why he was trying to change Breck. He just kept telling me how great Breck was.
Lauren suspects that Danes is planning for Breck and the other boys to take part in a covert operation.
I sort of thought maybe he was grooming the boys for some sort of terrorist activity.
He would say that he was running Syrian refugees through a pipeline into other countries. He portrayed himself as somebody who was part of the intelligence community. And a lot of the content that he was sharing was to do with terrorism and, quite nasty footage.
And I thought he was going to get them to do some mass hack on school or government computers, and they'd take the fall, and he would get away with it. Maybe he'd put them on a big mission with real guns and get them to do something horrible. That went through my head. I sensed something was wrong. I just didn't know how to fix it. I was scared when I phoned the police because I wasn't sure. In my heart, I felt sure, but I didn't have proof. And I phoned the police and I literally said, I need to speak to the department that deals with grooming.
In desperation, Lauren contacts Surrey Police, but they struggle to understand her concerns.
I feel my son and his friends are being groomed by this guy who runs the server. And they said to me, what's a server? And I went, I don't know, it's where they get together and game. So it was like almost the blind leading the blind in this conversation.
Okay, and what sort of concerns do you have then? I mean, obviously there's that age difference, but what if he's out?
He's trying to turn him against everything. He's grooming him for something because he's trying to change his thinking set on everything.
I think for grooming, the offence back then was that you had to arrange to meet on 2 separate occasions for it to be grooming. And of course this just doesn't meet the criteria. It's just a 14-year-old gaming online with an 18-year-old.
It scares me, I don't know if he's trying to groom them to become part of his group.
Yeah. Well, we'll do some research on this and then you've got the reference number there if you do find anything, like a contact number or anything.
Basically, I was told 3 times that intelligence would be checked, that they would look into it.
But the police decided not to take the case any further, and it later emerged that Dane's name was not even checked on the police national computer database.
Surrey Police, this, for them, it was maybe an 18-year-old undermining my mum's position with a 14-year-old.
That was then when I organized a meeting with other parents, and we sat the boys down 2 days later and literally said, look, we're worried.
Lauren and her ex-husband Barry outline a plan of action.
They decide that an intervention is in fact needed to physically tear Breck away from the relationship with Danes. So Breck was told that he can no longer go online. His computer was going to be taken away from him.
And so I even, said, I think you're being groomed. And Breck said, well, that's a harsh term to say grooming.
Breck and his friends idealise Lewis. Breck is young, he's only 14, perhaps a little bit childish, perhaps naive, but also Lewis, I think, is very cunning, deceitful, and very manipulative.
Unbeknown to Lauren and the other parents, Lewis Danes is spying on their meeting.
Danes had asked Breck to record that meeting, and he had a little MP3 player in his pocket, so he was able to get that meeting recorded.
It's going to sound weird, but there's no one else not in real life in gaming. There's not that connection where you have sort of mutual interest.
It could be just one way to assert his dominance and control over Breck to show who's in charge. It could be to set up this dynamic of them being very much in it together. You know, so Lewis is saying to Breck, it's me and you versus your mother who's making life difficult for us.
Danes kept the recording and even made a version where he added his own commentary.
It's quite chilling, really, because the two of them are arguing in the background, and Lauren arguing with Breck, and he's just in this monotonous voice. This is Lauren, the mother of Breck. Look at her and the way she's trying to control, and it's just weird. It's very strange.
With the recording in his possession, Danes has the upper hand.
At that point, Danes knew what we thought of him. He knew we were onto him, we didn't like him, we didn't trust him, we didn't believe him, and it became more dangerous because everything went underground. After we forbade the boys from gaming or speaking or socializing to Danes, Breck went back to acting like his happy-go-lucky self.
After hearing the outcome of the meeting, Danes secretly sends Breck a mobile phone so he can continue to communicate with him in private.
I thought everything was better. We didn't talk about, Danes anymore because I thought he was out of the picture.
The family spent Christmas together, and then into the new year, Breck went away on his trip to Spain. And sadly, that was the last time that Lauren saw Breck alive.
And I remember our last little meal together was Taco Bell, because that was my favorite naughty treat. And he ate just so... Wow, he was just such a good eater, because he would just enjoy it, and he could just put it away even though he was tall and thin. And I just remember enjoying that time with him because it was just us. It was a special time. I'm at least happy to know that he did have good times with me, and he would have known somewhere deep inside of him that I wasn't the bad guy.
Lauren hopes the school trip to Seville in Spain will mark a fresh start for Breck.
We hugged and kissed and said goodbye, and I just remember feeling so proud. And as he walked away, I thought how handsome he was.
When he was with the school party, he posted online him sitting next to a girl. Lewis Danes didn't like this. Lewis was berating him for putting a picture up online of him with a girl, and why would you leave yourself open to other people making comment about you and this sort of thing on Facebook? So Lewis obviously didn't like the fact that Breck was socialising with other people.
Lauren goes abroad on holiday herself, satisfied Danes no longer has a hold over Breck.
He texted me when he was away on the trip, and he just said, "Oh, it's amazing here, Mom. The food and the people, we're having such a good time." And I was so pleased, because I thought, this is exactly what I want for my kids. Life experiences outside of their bedroom and the computer, And I honestly, I thought everything was on track. I really did. I hate to admit how wrong I was.
Breck returns from Spain, and he goes to stay with his dad. And the next day, he tells his dad that he is now going off to stay the night with his friend.
Breck doesn't reveal that the friend is Lewis Danes, who has ordered a cab to take Breck and his computer equipment on a 31-mile journey to his flat in Grays, Essex.
Now, this is moving quite quickly into a real-world interaction between Breck and the man who has been grooming him.
He has this idealised, almost fictional version of what he thinks the attacker's going to be like. It's somebody that he respects, somebody that he admires, and he turns up to the house and he suddenly realises that this is some sort of trap.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
My name is Lewis Danes, I'm 18 years old.
Right, okay. And what's actually happened?
My friend came to stay the night with me yesterday, feeling very down, feeling suicidal.
One of the features is this kind of inappropriate politeness. You know, the way that he's initially really polite to the dispatch person. He's not really behaving like somebody who has just killed somebody.
And I woke up this morning, he was in a mess. I tried to calm him down. I hugged him and said that I was there for him. He grabbed, he shrugged me off.
You'd expect the caller to be much more emotional. They would want to get help there and then. Now,
You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you, he's definitely dead.
it just seems very methodical and thought through. He's talking as though he's rehearsed this call in his mind.
Okay, but why did he come to stay with you?
Because he was fed up with his home life.
Right, because he was fed up with his home life.
He's had a lot of problems. I've known him for a long time. He goes into a lot of detail, and I can only assume that he's thought about this and he knows that he's going to rely on this as his defence.
He claims that Breck is incredibly unhappy on the home front, you know, wanting to commit self-harm, suicide.
What's happened this morning?
I woke up. He was just standing up. He was in a mess. Hands on his face. I got up, I put my arms around him, and I said it was okay. He just shrugged me off and said no. Something, I can't remember exactly what he said. He was going on about how he didn't want to go home. He was fed up with his life. And he didn't want to go. In my room, adjacent to my bed, I have a chest of drawers. I had a penknife on there, folded. He picked it up, opened it, and then lost control.
Slow down, let me just take those details here. Penknife on the bedside table, Brett grabbed this,
Yeah.
what, in order to harm himself?
No, in order to harm me. He opened it and
Right,
then lost
okay.
control.
Lewis Dames is basically saying Breck came at him with a knife, and so Dames, in his mind, had to just resort to self-defence and ended up committing murder.
I, in self-defence, put my left arm up to block him from stabbing me effectively. We struggled. I got him to the ground. He got up. I grabbed a knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck, I believe somewhere near the brainstem. He turned around, tried to carry it on. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat. I believe I turned around and I slashed his throat.
Oh, it's just shocking. Incredibly difficult to listen to. People are harmed and killed in acts of self-defence. I mean, that does happen. I suspect that he does feel that by himself calling the police demonstrates the level of confidence he has that he may well get away with this.
My first reaction walking into that flat was how tidy it was. It was clean, it was tidy. There was no indication that anything untoward had taken place in that flat.
Lewis Danes is arrested at his home. Shortly after, Essex Police's digital forensics officer Clifton Pell searches the property.
I was shown around the lounge, I was shown around the kitchen, and there was the bedroom. And I opened the door, and Breck was still lying there, covered in blood, and with his throat cut. And when I looked across the bed, there was blood all over the bed, and there was blood on the laptop as well. So, yeah, you take a deep breath, and you feel really sad and really sorry for a life that's been taken.
I have a very clear sequence of events that day. It's just completely stuck in my mind. So I walked home from the park and I see these two police cars outside my house, which I thought initially was strange, and all of a sudden these two lady police officers came up to me. The police told me that I had to call my dad and tell him to come home, which is what I did. I called my dad, he was working, and I said that the police were at the house and they're saying that you need to come home. And he came in and all of a sudden there was just screaming and yelling and shouting, and we were so confused. We had no idea what was going on.
Chloe discovers that in the moments after the killing, Danes delivers a final message to the gamers on his server.
Danes had sent images of Breck's body to Breck's friends, and in turn Breck's friends communicated and messaged Breck's siblings to more or less say, if this is what's happened to Breck, we're really sorry for your loss.
I just remember being in my room, just crying and like screaming, and I was just suffering alone basically. Just having to read this about my brother is just so hard to think about.
I'd only been in Spain a couple of days, and I woke up with an impending sense of doom. And I didn't know why, and I ran through my head, why do I feel this weird, heavy feeling?
Shortly after breakfast, Lorin's phone rang.
This is the worst call any parent could ever get. And it was Dad that said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Danes has killed Breck. And my life ended, really. I could have died right then and there. I couldn't stop screaming. I just couldn't believe it. And I fell to the ground and screamed until they brought in a doctor to give me something to calm me down. And it's just so hard to have something so horrible that you just can't take back and you can't fix. There's no fixing it.
For a digital forensics analyst, the challenging thing is to make sure you don't lose evidence.
And Pell faces an immediate problem. Danes had taken care to cover his tracks.
In the bathroom, the sink was full of water, but there were 3 mobile phones in there, and there was 2 hard drives and also an electrical board in there. So the implication was that Lewis Danes had tried to corrupt or do something with the electronics that were actually in that sink.
Pell and his team race to recover the data that Danes has attempted to destroy, while other officers look into the killer's background.
It quickly became apparent that Lewis Danes wasn't the high-flying computer engineer that he was claiming to be.
They find he lived with his grandparents after his mother moved abroad with a new partner.
And there are reports that he was in and out of different local authority care homes. At the time of grooming Breck, Danes was unemployed, essentially living in his grandparents' flat, and was in receipt of several welfare benefits.
Danes is taken into custody and interrogated by officers.
He tried to blame Breck and said that Breck was upset because his parents, particularly me, was so horrible. And he went to Danes to be consoled, and then he got upset. I think maybe Danes tried to kiss him, and then he got upset, and so he pulled out a knife. It was him trying to say that it was self-defense, and Breck, tried to hurt him.
He just wants to create this fantasy in his mind, claiming that it was self-defense when he really killed him in cold blood.
Breck was tied up with duct tape. It was just one of his, sort of web of lies.
For ourselves as digital forensics officers, we are responsible for the recovery of data from digital devices and for the processing of that data and then making that available for review to investigators.
Pell and his team need to find a way to recover texts from the waterlogged phones found in Danes' sink.
They did have to be dried out. It's not the moisture that causes problems, it's when a device dries out and you have like electrolytes, little conductive elements that then mess with the electronics. We made sure that those devices were dried properly. We got data off the 2 phones. There's another one that wasn't actually working.
The data on the phones offers a string of vital clues.
Danes sent a message to Breck saying, when you come over, you need to tell your dad that you're somewhere else. So Lewis Danes prepped Breck with an answer that he was going to be going to a friend, and he wasn't to tell his dad that he was staying over at his friend's until the night, so that will then give him a chance to then get over to Lewis's and then to be able to keep the deception going.
More recovered texts reveal Danes lied to Breck that he was seriously ill and wanted him to take over his software company. He asked Breck to meet him in person at his home to finalise the details. Pell's team recover other files from Daines' laptop, showing this offer was merely bait.
Well, look at the sort of date that we had. Lewis did plan this attack. He ordered online condoms and duct tape in the same order. That was at the beginning of 2014.
And these were discovered to have been used during the murder. Premeditation is a distinctive type of murder. It shows that the perpetrator has thought through the act that they're about to commit. It shows that they've committed to carrying out that particular violent crime.
Bodily fluids found at the scene suggest the crime was a depraved sexual act.
And I think for the blood, the saliva, the DNA, all those things point to the fact that it was a sexually motivated murder.
And as investigators explore Daines' school days, they make another grim discovery.
It came to light that as a 15-year-old boy, Daines had been accused of raping another boy. Now, this particular allegation didn't go anywhere. It didn't lead to any convictions at all.
When Lauren had contacted Surrey police 3 months earlier, they had promised to investigate Daines' background. It turned out they had not even run a search on his name.
I think I was pretty angry to think that Daines sexually assaulted another boy because he wasn't punished. I don't think anything happened to him.
An independent police complaints commission report finds that a police national computer check should have been made into Daines' background after Lauren's call, but no checks were carried out. Surrey police admit mistakes were made and pay Breck's family compensation in 2016.
From a mother's perspective, that aspect must be incredibly difficult to reconcile. There were warning signs there, there were red flags there. Breck's mother was shouting her suspicions from the rooftops, and ultimately it fell on deaf ears and serves now as a very stark reminder of the real dangers of online predators.
Daines is charged with murder, but despite the damning dossier of evidence, he continues to insist his actions were justified.
I was furious. The fact that he was claiming self-defense and saying that my brother was down and depressed was just crazy to me. I was horrified to think that people might believe his story.
I was nervous. I hadn't ever been to court for anything. And the first day, the jurors all came in and were chosen, and the pleas were read out, and Daines said not guilty to everything. And yeah, we didn't know what to expect.
There are a number of factors why somebody like Daines would grow up to be who he was and to do what he did. Certain traumas in childhood can, go into kind of fracturing somebody's identity and personality to an extent that they can themselves carry out harmful acts against other people.
And even from behind bars, Lauren believes Daines' threat to her family hasn't gone away.
He found a way from prison to send messages and tweets and a blog, and he was able to get his voice out, which is completely illegal. And he basically was, again, saying I was a bad mom, saying that all I cared about was raising money. I remember actually feeling really scared at the time because I didn't know if he'd escaped from prison. I thought, did he get out? Are my kids safe? Is he out and looking for the rest of my family?
And her fears are heightened when Lauren's daughter Chloe receives a series of Snapchat messages.
I don't know if it was Lewis. I don't know if it was a random person. He knew the exact location of the grave where Breck was buried. He knew too many details that wasn't on the news. And he said that Breck was very sexy before he died, and he sent him nudes and asked if I wanted to see them. And then he wanted to speak to my mum as well. He was like, is Lauren there? And it was horrific.
How devastating it must be for Breck's family is re-traumatizing, so they've already gone through his horrific murder and that loss, and then to be goaded from prison.
Police investigated, but he had set up a system by it. They couldn't trace it, and he didn't actually get in trouble for it, but hopefully it's in his record for when he tries to get probation. He's never shown remorse. He's never said he's sorry. He's always blamed me, so he's not fit for human consumption.
I like to remember Breck as being the older figure of the siblings, the protector of us three. In our childhood photos, it was always me and the triplets just all in a row, all the same height, and then just Breck was towering over us. I'm not a big fan of some of the ways that people have portrayed Breck online. Some will say that my brother was stupid or dumb. Why would he fall for that? What an idiot for going there and believing those lies, when there's just such a simple explanation. He was groomed. It goes to show that even the smartest person can just be completely groomed into believing such ridiculous lies.
I have a theory that a lot of bad things that happen in the world are because of jealousy. And I definitely feel that Danes was jealous of Breck. He knew what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a pilot. He wanted to work in technology. He was focused. He was innately good and handsome and clever and funny. And, I adored that kid.
Alan Morgan found his wife's body in the back storeroom of their shop when he and their 2 children returned from the cinema on Thursday night.
This is the position that she was left in.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific, isn't it?
Carol's life was taken away from her at the age of 36. She deserves for the police to find who killed her.
Carol should still be alive today and enjoying her children and her grandchildren, and somebody's robbed that of her.
In over 40 years of investigative work, nobody had been charged with Carol's murder.
The attack that was sustained on Carol was so ferocious and so brutal.
We're investigating the murder that happened at the shop back in 1981.
Everyone that loved her deserves to know what happened to Carol.
The tragic element of this case is simply that it's not been solved. My case, if we ever get it there, is going to be circumstantial.
Yeah, it is. So, that's my overview. It's a bloody tough case.
This is one last attempt to try and get justice for Carol.
The scene of our offence is 61 Finch Crescent in Linslade. Carol was alone in the store at the time of the attack as her husband Alan and her 2 children Dean and Jane were out at the cinema. So in 1981, the original SIO focused very much on a burglary or a robbery that had gone wrong.
A man was seen about 500 yards from the shop in a motor car. He was seen to be clutching to his chest 2 plastic bags. It would appear at this stage that the bags contained the stolen money and the cigarettes from the shop.
That weapon that was used must have been a really sharp-bladed article to have caused such brutal injuries. Carol still got her wedding ring on, and this was supposed to be a robbery, and if it was a robbery, why did they not take this stuff that would have been valuable?
Despite having an alibi checked and accepted by the police, Mr. Morgan can't convince some of his neighbours that he's innocent. What are they saying about you now?
It's been found that I killed my wife. As the police know themselves, and you yourselves know, well, I was in Luton. Take the kids to the pictures.
Alan's alibi has been checked. His alibi is concrete. I have to accept that that's where he was. Our motive is essentially the classic love story. There's an ongoing affair between Alan and Margaret, and that the motive is embedded in that affair.
There was a fairly prolonged relationship, I think, between Alan and Margaret. There's anecdotal evidence that they were even found in bed the very next morning.
So this is Alan and Margaret after the murder. Then moved up north, and then they've gone on to get married.
My decision is to bring both Alan and Margaret in under arrest.
I'm from the police. I'm I've come to arrest you this morning on suspicion of a murder of Carol Morgan.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of conspiracy to murder.
What?
And the murder of Carol Patricia Morgan.
I had no idea that anything like this was going to occur. Do you have any information about who was responsible?
No, none at all.
Police are appealing for anyone with information, no matter how small, to get in touch and speak to the dedicated incident room.
Alan and Margaret have been released from police custody under investigation. It can be frustrating when you have to release suspects whilst the investigation continues, but particularly in the most serious of cases, we don't give up. There's been comprehensive media strategy which involved witness appeals, and as a consequence of that, a new witness has come forward with new evidence, potentially undermining Alan Morgan's alibi. We're scheduled for a 2-hour briefing today because there is lots and lots to go through. I'm going to hand over to Lindsay if you want to take us through all of the significant developments since we last met, please.
In terms of witnesses, we had a guy call into the incident room a couple of weeks ago, Michael Merrin, who lived in Leighton Buzzard at the time of the murder. Essentially, he has said that his brother sent him a message after Christmas with a picture of the poster from Linslade about the murder and said, "What do you think about this?" He's had a think about it and has made contact with us, and I've spoken to him, and he is saying that he was a regular at the shop. He knew Alan and Carol to talk to. He spoke to Alan on a regular basis about football and cars. He knew Alan's car by sight, and he knew Alan well enough to obviously have conversations regularly.
On the evening of the 13th of August 1981, took the turn around the roundabout towards Leighton Buzzard, and I see Alan Morgan on the other side of the road, 1, 2, 3 seconds, and he drove past in that direction, heading towards Finch Crescent. And I obviously carried on home. A couple of days later, when the local paper came out, it stated that she died on the Thursday evening, and that the police weren't interested in Alan Morgan because he was at the cinema. And I turned to my mum and I said, well, that can't be right. I saw him on Thursday evening when we were driving back from the railway station at around 7:15. And my mum said to me, well, do you think you should go and tell the police that? And I said, I don't know, what do you think? And she said, well, if you're sure that you saw him. I said, Mum, I definitely saw him. So I made arrangements to go to Leighton Buzzard Police Station, and I told them what I'd seen, and they said, thank you very much for coming in, but at this moment in time, we've ruled Mr. Morgan out of our inquiry, because he was at the cinema in Luton at that point in time. And that was, for me, the end of it. I know what my 18-year-old self saw, and I 100% am convinced, have always been convinced, that what I saw that night was Alan Morgan in his car.
Clearly what we need to investigate and explore is whether we can prove or corroborate that information, because if Alan has come back to Linslade, then clearly that presents him the opportunity to murder Carol. So we made arrests in November of last year. Wherever they could rely upon, I can't remember that, that's what they did. I see. So the National Crime Agency have a number of specialists who I can ask for objective and independent advice that I can consider as part of my decision-making process. What I would say is that Alan was always considered to have an established alibi. He had taken the children to the cinema to a double bill, which we think would have run for about 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. They were at the cinema 4 hours, and Dad would have sat next to him all the time.
No. There is doubt around, or there is the possibility that he could have done anything within that time, and his alibi is nailed on.
Oh, great.
And then that is called into question, because as recently as this year, a witness has come forward as a result of all of our media activity. There's a chap by the name of Michael Merrin.
Yeah.
He specifically says he sees Alan Morgan travelling back into Linslade in his car on the night of the murder. Now, I've got the team searching the 7,000 documents that we've got, but we just can't find any reference to Merrin or anything that Merrin may have provided to the original investigation team. This for me is a domestic homicide. Layering lots and lots and lots of coincidences and lies, and but in terms of direct physical evidence, I'm not sure I'm not sure the golden nugget exists. Now there is forensic work still ongoing, but I think this will always be a circumstantial case.
Going to your hypothesis then, Morgan and Spooner conspired together to do it.
Yeah.
So I get all that. What I'm not as clear on is, you have a hypothesis, or are you still working through that?
As to who was the...
Yeah.
I haven't.
Okay.
I can't sit here. To this day, I'm not sure. I think either of them could have done.
Yeah.
I think they could have paid someone to do it. I really don't know. My case, if we ever get it there, it's going to be circumstantial.
Yeah, it is. So, it's a bloody tough case, isn't it? Let's be honest on where it is. I concur with what your hypotheses are. The issue for me is how we get there, of course. And that's always the challenge, isn't it, you know?
I am Sian Saunders, Senior Crown Prosecutor in the Complex Casework Unit of the Crown Prosecution Service. My job is to decide whether or not there's a realistic prospect of conviction in a case and whether it's in the public interest to prosecute that case. This is an incredibly interesting case, but it's also going to be a very, very difficult case because witnesses may be dead and witnesses may not remember. So we are relying on an investigation that happened over 40 years ago, so it's going to be a very difficult case to prosecute.
We're just heading out to Linslade Cemetery to try and locate the gravestone of Carol Morgan. So in a cold case like this, I think it gives us some good background in relation to the family. So for us, it's quite important to try and find that out, who's put the gravestone down and what it says. We're here, aren't we? Somewhere here. No idea where this is going to be. I'm assuming we're looking for something a lot older. Yeah, some of these look new and cared for. This one? The open book. Here we go. Cherished memories of our beloved daughter Carol, forever in our thoughts. And then the other side of the book is blank. No mention of her being a mum or a wife. Or a surname? No. It's awful. Poor Carol. I think the fact that Morgan isn't on there suggests that maybe the parents wanted to disassociate her from the name, from him. I mean, could it suggest that they didn't have a very good relationship with him, or that they thought that he was involved in some way in her death?
Auntie Carol was someone who was a quiet, relaxed person, but bubbly. She was friendly. She always smiling. I just remember her always smiling. I remember a time when we didn't see Auntie Carol. This was after she married Alan Morgan. It was a couple of years after they married, they moved away to Leighton Buzzard, and we never heard from them again. We lost contact with them, and I think a lot of that was to do with the fact that he was so manipulative. I felt that he's had something to do with it. When I was younger, he just was a person that I didn't know him much, but whenever I saw him, he wasn't a person that was very friendly. He was nothing like Carol. She was open and kind, and he wasn't.
The investigation has stalled somewhat during the pandemic. So we recently reviewed all of the original witnesses who provided statements to the investigation back in 1981. There were a number of those witnesses that we hadn't been able to trace, hadn't been able to catch up with. And in the last week or so, we've been able to trace one of those witnesses who's provided significant information to the investigation. This was somebody that lived locally, somebody who was a child, i.e. under 18 years old at the time of the offence, and who not only knew our suspect, but also knew Carol Lau. And I think at this stage that's as much as I'm prepared to say. Obviously, when a witness contacts us, we have to have some conversation with them to ascertain what it is that they've got to say, what is their account. In this particular instance, the evidence that this individual started to talk about was so significant and so key and critical to our case that the officer deliberately stopped that conversation and said, I can't talk to you about this in any depth. We asked them to stop talking and we asked them to wait until we're in a position to go and sit down with them and capture the entire account for the first time as much as possible on camera. And as we speak at this moment in time, those officers are with that witness and securing her account. Yes, massive, absolutely massive development for the investigation. We are very much, as a team, of the opinion that this is the piece of evidence that we have been looking for. This is the direct evidence that has evaded us so far.
Right then, we're all good to go. Okay, and what do you think happened? What do I think happened? I think she had a fight. And lost the fight. Who would have wanted to fight her? Whoever it was really angry at her, hated her. And what makes you say that? Because the way she was killed. It's a pretty savage way, isn't it? And do you know anyone that might have wanted her dead? Yeah. Who? Her husband. And I suppose Margaret. When I was 14, I got expelled from school, and Margaret was assigned as my tutor from the age of 14 to 16. I was in a pretty bad place. I was really, really struggling. And Margaret really helped with that. So I could talk about, the sort of stuff you wouldn't talk to your mum or your dad about. And yeah, she saved my life in some ways. I came to really admire Margaret and to respect her a lot, and I grew fond of her. It was at least 3 months before the murder. It could have been longer. I went to a pub called Dolphin, which no longer exists in Lane Buzzard. I met both of them there, and it wasn't just a casual thing. It was arranged by Margaret, and I could really understand why. It led to a conversation about, well, I'd quite like Carol dead from Alan, and then them talking about various ways and ruling them out, like insulin. Then there was a car accident, and there was neither one of them knew enough about car mechanics to be able to do that. And what about the children? They could be in the car, etc. Looking at it through my adult eyes now, why did it take you 42 years to speak up? But it's not as straightforward as that. It's like I was a 17-year-old mixed-up kid who didn't really know which way was up and had more than enough of her own problems. I found out that Carol had died. Margaret phoned me and told me. I was absolutely freaked out. And she was very keen to say, don't talk to anyone. She kept saying he didn't do it. And I kept saying, yeah, but I don't believe he didn't do it. You might believe that, but I don't believe that. I think he's capable of it. And he hated her. You know he hated her. And now I'm confused. Now I'm really frightened now. Because the one person I never considered that could have done it is her. In a million years. I never asked myself that. I never asked her that. I never questioned it. I totally
He 100% trusted that she was a good person. She wouldn't dream of doing that. She saved my life, you know. She'd been so good to me. She would never hurt anyone. And I don't know anymore whether I'm right. And it's killing me. I always hoped that I would have a chance. You know, that somebody would ask me, that the police would come to me. And I was pleased and relieved when my mum said, the police were here and to me and they want to speak to you. And I was like, hallelujah. Hallelujah.
To cut a really long story short, essentially she went to the Dolphin pub. She was there by Margaret and Alan was already there. They discussed that he hated Carol, he didn't want her in his life, and how could they get rid of her? There was a discussion around, if we did get rid of her, maybe we could do it with insulin. Then they discussed, well, maybe we could set up a car crash. And then they sort of said, well, actually, maybe we could get someone else to help. Looking back now as an adult, she now thinks they were trying to involve her in a conspiracy, and she was so frightened that she left the pub. Margaret then came after her and said, oh, what are you worried about? It's only a joke, he's not going to do anything. And Jane categorically says that she believes that Alan would be capable of doing that, and she didn't think it would happen.
This is a huge step forward. This is the first time we've heard this direct evidence, so that absolutely supports the need to bring them in under arrest, and along with everything else, put this evidence to them. There's confirmation of a conspiracy, and there's direct evidence of overhearing that conspiracy being discussed. Still a long way to go, still a lot of work to do, but a kind of work to be done with a renewed vigour and you know, with some more optimism now around what that might result in. Yeah, it's good. It's good development. We are in a different position this time round. You know, I accept that on that first arrest, you could almost say it was almost like a bit of a fact find, really. And I think, if I'm being honest, we were in a position where they had the upper hand, as did their legal representation. And we're down in Brighton, and I think everything was kind of stacked against us. I see it very differently this time round. No, we're not down the road to Brighton. You're coming back to Bedfordshire, which is where the murder was committed. You know, this is a murder. This is a murder investigation, not some sweets that have been nicked off a shelf in your local co-op store. So you're going to come back to Bedfordshire and we're going to deal with you in Bedfordshire. You know, straight away we are dictating this is what's happening. We are in control of this. This is our investigation and we are running it.
And it feels different this time, I think, you.
Well, now we've got something to put to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those being Jane. So, yeah, we've got things to talk about.
Detectives investigating the death of a woman near Leighton Buzzard nearly 40 years ago have arrested 2 people on suspicion of murder.
What can you tell me about James Bunting?
No comment.
Can you tell me a bit more about the relationship between you and Jane?
No comment.
So, Jane says that you were being quite open about the fact you wanted to get out of your marriage.
Okay.
Did you? Did you want to get out of your marriage?
You never know what to expect when you go into an interview. We prepare for all eventualities. We prepare for people to say nothing, exercise their right to go no comment. But if someone is innocent, particularly of a murder, and they have played no part in the murder, one would expect them to be honest, transparent, detailed, and to try and help you, particularly if it's your wife or someone that you love, you know, and care about.
So she said some of the suggestions that you'd come out with were that you could use your insulin to kill her. Have you ever thought about doing that? That you could stage a car accident. Have you ever thought about doing that? You both then began to discuss various ways about killing Carol, about what if Carol had a car accident. Is this jogging any memories? No. Margaret?
No.
One of the things that you said is, I'd quite like...
Alleged to have said.
Well, this is what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. Okay. Did you say
I said it?
Okay.
But I'm alleged to have said it, but don't comment. I did not.
You did not? Okay, just tell me that then, if you didn't. I'd quite like my wife gone.
No.
You didn't say that, or you did say that?
I didn't say that. No. I don't know.
You don't know if you said it?
No comment.
Do you remember that you asked Jane not to talk to the police about this conversation in the pub?
No.
Did you ask her not to mention to the police?
I don't recall the conversation at all.
One of the things that Jane said to you in regards to about killing someone, that she could never do that. And then you replied and she said it was as cold as ice, I could.
Now, I'm sure now you can see, Margaret, why you're in custody today because
Absolutely.
of what she's saying.
I do not recall any of those conversations, and I have said that all the way along.
Yeah. Because if her account is right, there is a conspiracy going on there. That's if her account is right, okay? May frowning at me, but if her account is right, there's the conspiracy. It's very serious.
I understand that.
Yeah?
I do understand
So you
that.
can see why now you're in custody today. Now, I'm glad you understand that.
Yes, I do. As I say, and I keep repeating it, I do not recall
I know you
any
keep
of
saying,
these conversations.
you keep saying you do not recall any of these conversations, Margaret, but you're not saying they didn't happen.
Good. No. She can't keep to a no comment at all. She's advised but still couldn't help herself.
That is a bizarre response, isn't it? I don't recall that.
that's really bizarre.
Because she goes no comment.
Yeah.
And so then I'll say, well, okay, let's clarify. You say no comment because you don't remember, or you say no comment because you just don't want to say? That's because I don't remember.
It is a bizarre, because you know what you'd expect is no, that conversation didn't happen. That conversation has never happened.
No.
Don't know what she's talking about, but to say I don't remember it, that's not very credible, is it? We, so far in this investigation, are no nearer being able to prove who murdered Carol. However, we are remarkably close now to being able to prove that there was a conspiracy to have Carol murdered.
You then asked Jane if her boyfriend would know anyone who would kill Carol.
I don't know. No. Did they approach somebody who was known to them, or indirectly or directly? Were they able to recruit a, for want of a better phrase, a hit person to carry out the murder? It's not something we can answer with any degree of certainty at the moment. There's only Alan or Margaret that can tell me if somebody was paid by them to murder Carol.
Jane said that she felt like she was being drawn into a conspiracy, something that she didn't want to be part of, something that you wanted her to be part of. Is that right?
No comment.
Did you want Jane to be part of plans to murder your wife?
No comment.
Was that your goal that evening?
No comment. I've put a phone call in to the Crown Prosecution Service just to consider the charging decision. I know that the interview teams are kind of there and chomping at the bit, and they'd really like to see us go for a charge, but at the moment my thoughts are that they're likely to be released under investigation.
We now have a significant amount of evidence that suggests that Alan and Margaret Morgan were involved in this offence, but I can't charge the case until I'm absolutely sure that there's nothing in the material from the 1981 case that might undermine our case against Alan and Margaret. And so I've advised the police to complete a review of all the paperwork from the 1981 case. The decision to charge has to be right, and it has to be right first time in a case like this, and it's my decision and one that I have to be prepared to stand by, and until the case is ready, I'm not prepared to make a charging decision.
A man and a woman in their 70s arrested in connection with the death of a woman near Leighton Buzzard nearly 40 years ago have been released under investigation. The body of 36-year-old...
Police say while no one has ever been charged, they remain committed to finding out the truth for Carol's family.
It's a huge undertaking to review all of the investigation material, but it's so important that it's done properly, and it's so important that it's given the right time. It can make or break your case. Today's effectively D-Day, if you like. Today is the day where I find out whether 4.5 years of investigative work is going to result in a prosecution. So this is us having a conference with CPS and council now that they're in receipt of our full evidential case, and asking, okay, are we going to prosecute this? Are you going to give me a charging decision? Are we going to court?
So we are moving closer to being able to reach an ultimate decision on the critical question of whether there is a case to go to a jury or there isn't.
It's a complex case which relies on the person presenting it to a court understanding the fine detail and being able to explain to a jury how those small pieces of evidence fit together into the bigger picture. Whilst the decision as to whether or not to prosecute is always going to be one for me, it's incredibly helpful to have an opinion from Pavlos because he is known to have worked on large and complex cases in the past.
Okay, so this has been the most thorough re-examination of this case, and if there's a case, there'll be a case of conspiracy to murder against Alan Morgan, Margaret Morgan, and if there's a case to charge against them both, I think everyone will agree that there is more evidence in relation to Alan than there is in relation to Margaret, albeit that she's inextricably linked, given her close relationship with Alan Morgan. So the case that I've advised in favour of charging, which the Crown Prosecution Service will review, is that Alan Morgan and Margaret Morgan conspired together and with the person who killed Carol Morgan to murder her, and that was done by offering payment which was made to somebody who then committed murder.
Of course I want to catch the person that murdered Carol. Of course we do. But there's no direct evidence about who that somebody was. There really are only two people that know the answer to that question, and they're the two people that we're investigating for the conspiracy to murder Carol.
In order to prove a conspiracy, we only have to prove that there was an agreement to kill. So in this case, we would be alleging that Alan and Margaret found somebody and paid them to kill Carol.
Busy. But come on in and meet the team. Alongside the normal lines of inquiry and investigation that my team have been conducting, one area of investigation that we used was that on each occasion that Alan and Margaret were arrested, we would record any conversation that they have with each other.
If I need to wait.
I say we don't say. We don't know. We don't know anything. What's the pictures?
So the evidence contained no admissions of guilt, no conversation that lends itself to what actually happened on the night or who was actually responsible, but their behaviour, their comments to each other, the general demeanour and discussion they have is absolutely of assistance to our case.
Alan says to Margaret, I don't want to say anything because they might have.
And then they go quiet.
You heard that?
Yeah.
What was it that he might say that he wouldn't want the police to hear? These are potentially significant, suspicious comments, and I'd be interested to hear, if they're brought in for further interviews, what explanation they give.
In light of the recorded evidence and along with the review of all of the investigation material, it enables me to have Alan and Margaret rearrested for the conspiracy to murder Carol.
Morning, Margaret.
Yeah. Oh, Winnie, you right?
Is Alan here as well?
Oh, yeah, hello.
Can we come in, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is he up?
No.
Oh, okay.
Winnie, come on, get. Just gonna come up. It's the police.
Alan, right, I need you to listen to me, okay? Following your previous arrests and release, okay, a number of inquiries have been conducted over a period of time. As a result of those inquiries, I'm now arresting you on suspicion of conspiracy to murder Carol Patricia Morgan on or before the Thursday, the 13th of August, 1981.
So I'm arresting you on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Okay. And that is the murder of Carol Patricia Morgan on or before the Thursday, the 13th of August, 1981. Right. Okay.
So the plan today is that yourself and your wife are going to come with us. We're going to go to Bedfordshire Police Headquarters, where you're going to be interviewed throughout the day. Okay? And then decisions will be made thereafter. So I need you to get yourself dressed and ready to go, please.
I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. All right. That's the only thing.
Do it, bud.
Just don't tell me.
Yeah, well, I know. To be honest, love, I don't know what they've done.
It's absolutely.
Our suspects were arrested this morning. They've been transported back up to Bedfordshire, so we're awaiting their arrival. I just need to check in with the team, see what's happened, what I need to be aware of, and make sure that everything's running as it should be. This will be the final stage of our investigation, and the fact that our lawyer, Charles Saunders, from the Crown Prosecution Service is present here with us is very encouraging.
On the basis of the material I have already and the review of all the material that has been undertaken, I'm almost in a position where I can make a charging decision. The police have now gathered this evidence from the recordings, and it's really important that I understand Alan and Margaret's view and explanation of that recording before I make a charging decision.
So this is a conversation between you and Alan on the 27th of November, so when you were first arrested. So it's difficult to hear, but you shush there and whisper something outside of the mouth.
To win, probably. That sounded like.
From the point of view it looks from me, this looks very suspicious. Is there anything you laughing about it? But
I know I'm laughing.
Is there anything?
No comment.
Well, tell me why I'm getting that wrong.
No comment.
You lower your voice for that part when you're shushing him, and you whisper something to him deliberately so we can't hear, and then you raise your voice back up again, either side saying I need a wee, so we can't hear what you're saying.
As I have said before, on every occasion, I am absolutely nothing to do with it.
So, why would an innocent person do that? Why would you shoot someone who's trying to get the story straight for the police? Why not protest your innocence? She started with I need a wee, and then finished with I'm going to say I need a wee.
No comment.
Just cover the shushing and then whispering in the middle.
No comment.
Why is it you find this funny?
I want to say something.
No, you don't have to.
I am. Have you ever been in this situation that I'm in now?
Thankfully not.
Right.
Not sure
if you wouldn't like it.
Right.
It doesn't matter what I say.
We agree on that.
All right?
Yeah.
Whatever I say,
yeah,
or whatever you say.
The problem is you're not saying anything else.
No. I'm trying.
Well, you just go no comment.
I know I'm not saying no comment because I'm frightened of what you're going to do Even if...
What we're doing is trying to get your...
No, you're not. You're trying to incriminate me in doing whatever.
How?
I don't know.
Nor do we, because we're not trying to...
just have a break?
Okay.
The only people that have benefited from Carol's death are you and Alan, Margaret. Nobody else.
How many times do I have to keep saying I have had nothing to do with this?
The only person that can benefit from this is you and Margaret, and which is exactly what happened. She moved in a short while later. You played happy families and moved away a couple of months later. The shop was sold up and bought and paid for, and then you went on to buy another shop, and everything was fine after that. Is there anything you want to tell us?
No comment.
She was probably advised to go no comment, but in true Margaret style, she couldn't do that. She reiterated several times that she wasn't involved, that he wasn't involved.
She's not denying that what we're telling her is happening.
Just can't explain.
She just said, I don't remember the conversation, I don't know why I would do that. I said, do you agree that what we've read out is what's been played to you? And she's like, yeah, that's definitely me shushing. That's definitely in doing what you're saying. But I just don't remember the conversation. I don't know why I would do that. But we're totally innocent. That's all the way through. We're totally innocent. However, if I was a third person, I'd think the same as you.
No, if you're innocent, you know you're innocent.
Yeah,
you protest your innocence. You have nothing to hide. You're not worried about anybody recording you.
So it's mainly no comment, and he did stay no comment this time because every time he went to talk and he didn't want to talk, the solicitor just tapped him on the side.
Yeah, I mean, we probably suggested like the shushing. I don't want to say anything because you're clearly aware that it's been recorded. You've clearly got something to hide, and you're not telling us. You're clearly involved in some way with Carol's murder, but you're just not prepared to tell us about it. No comment. So I was like, well, that speaks for itself.
I think that brings us to you, Sean, and with the...
You're all sitting there hoping
Well,
that you...
what do you... Is there anything else you need from us? What do you need?
I don't need anything else.
Okay.
So I think I've got it all, and I don't think that anything that they've said today changes anything that we've previously discussed or thought about for the last 5 years. I think we're happy that there's nothing in there that's going to catch us out, which is the most important thing. Nothing at trial that's suddenly going to come out that we don't know about. With that in mind, I think there is enough evidence to charge both of them with conspiracy to murder.
Excellent.
And I just need to finish off the advice. It's pretty much done, and I will be able to hit the button.
To finally get to that point where an independent decision maker is saying, yeah, we're going to charge, the evidence is sufficient to charge. It's a huge relief, but it's also a great deal of satisfaction.
Okay, so CPS had come back with a charging decision to charge him with one offence. This officer here is going to read out the charge.
On the 13th of August 1981 at Leighton Buzzard in the county of Bedfordshire, you conspired together with Margaret Morgan to murder Carol Morgan.
So, in relation to that charge, Alan, do you want to make a reply? Not guilty.
Carol was a really, really ordinary woman, and I don't say that unkindly. She was just an ordinary woman doing a really ordinary job in a really quiet housing estate, and she died in a most extraordinary way. And actually, if you take out of the picture the robbery hypothesis and look at it, who else had a motive to kill her? Who else would have wanted her dead? And why was she killed with such ferocity? So it comes down ultimately to motive, and then really the only people who needed or wanted her dead were Alan and Margaret. It gave them what they needed, it gave them what they wanted. They wanted to be together, and there wasn't any other way. It's horribly simple, but devastating and very sad for Carol and Carol's family.
You were charged with the following offence. You do not have to say anything, but it may be a defence if you do not mention now something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do so may be given in evidence. On the 13th of August 1981 at Leighton Buzzard in the county of Bedfordshire, conspired together with Alan Morgan to murder Carol Morgan.
In relation to that charge, do you want to make a reply?
Wish to plead not guilty.
Not guilty, okay.
I did Alan and then she did, Kelly did Margaret.
Not guilty?
Yeah, they both said exactly the same. Both said not guilty straight away. Yeah.
And just because we've charged them, they ain't going to suddenly roll over and say, oh yeah, all right, you're right, are they? So
it's done.
Good. From the outset, I always thought we had a good chance of detecting this and seeing Alan and Margaret charged with this offence. I'm just pleased for the team. They've worked so hard on this. I get a great deal of satisfaction out of knowing they will feel elated as to what we've achieved today. So now that we have charged Alan and Margaret, it's time to prepare for a Crown Court trial. So today is our first day of trial at Luton Crown Court. Do I believe that Alan and Margaret are involved in Carol's murder? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. I think they're involved, have orchestrated it. But it doesn't matter what I think, does it? It's the jury that determine that.
The trial many feared would never see the light of day finally got underway, almost 43 years after Carol Morgan was hacked to death and found on a shop floor in the town of Linslade.
42 years after his second wife, Carol, was found repeatedly struck with an axe or a machete, Alan Morgan and Margaret Morgan, who was his lover at the time and is now his third wife, arrived at Luton Crown Court to face charges of conspiracy to murder, charges they both deny.
Telling a story through the structure of a trial is always hard, but here we've got decades that have passed. And so what I really want the jury to be able to understand is the nature of that illicit affair that Alan and Margaret were having with each other, and also understanding the evidence that either or both of them conspired with another killer to commit the murder of Carol Morgan.
Jurors in the trial of a couple accused of conspiracy to murder have retired to consider their verdict. The couple, who are in their 70s, have been on trial at Luton Crown Court for the past 8 weeks.
The jury are in their room, deliberating. We have no idea. The whole process is sacrosanct, locked down. Only they know what they're talking about. It could still go one of two ways. The worst possible outcome, I think, for everyone would be a hung jury, because I'm fairly confident we would go again if that panned out. And that brings a whole rehash of all the stresses and trials and tribulations we and the witnesses have been through.
All the evidence suggests that we've got the right people. So I think if it becomes back as not guilty, that'll be the end of it. There won't be any. It will remain open, but there's no evidence to suggest any other routes or lines of inquiry.
It's a nerve-wracking time for everyone involved, but obviously this is the summation of years of work for us. So it's a bit, you just don't know what's going to happen, so it's just a waiting game, really.
Everything is at stake. Everything's at stake. This has been a 6-year journey for me. It's been a 43-year journey for justice for Carol Morgan and Carol Morgan's family. So everything's at stake. It's the first time anybody's been charged, stood trial in relation to Carol's murder. So the outcome of this is really significant. After a 6-year investigation and a 43-year journey for justice for Carol Morgan, we finally got our verdict. Alan Morgan has been convicted unanimously of conspiracy to murder Carol Morgan. The jury were out deliberating for almost exactly 1 week, and they've acquitted Margaret Morgan of conspiracy to murder. She's free, she's at liberty to go and get on with her life as she sees fit, but clearly that life will now be without Alan Morgan.
The verdict against Margaret is one that the jury came to. I can't go behind that. They heard all the evidence, they made their decision. I have no way of knowing what it was that made them come to that conclusion, but the evidence against Alan was always going to be stronger.
sentenced for conspiracy to murder your wife, Carol Morgan, who was savagely killed on the 13th of August 1981. Only one person knows the identity of the murderer, and that is you, Mr. Morgan. That is the secret which you have harboured for the last 40 years. The law has now caught up with you, and you must pay due punishment for your part in this crime. There's only one truly wicked person who's been in this court, and that is you, Alan Morgan. For conspiracy to murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Taking into account the aggravating and mitigating factors to which I have referred, the minimum term to be served shall be 22 years. You may be taken down.
Margaret, is there anything you'd like to say? Your reaction to the sentence?
I'm really pleased with the sentencing. We couldn't have asked for more. I was somewhat surprised. I was concerned that the minimum term was going to be a lot less than 22 years. I think it sends out a fantastic message.
The sentence is a just one, in accordance with the law as it was at the time. Whilst it's going to be difficult for Alan to spend 22 years or the rest of his life in prison, it's only fair that he has to be punished for what he did to Carol.
And Carol's life was taken away. So suddenly. So shockingly. She didn't deserve any of this, and she should be living her life to the full.
Carol has missed out on seeing her children grow into adulthood, seeing them have successful lives, seeing them become parents and becoming a grandparent. She has been robbed of all of that. I'm obviously pleased with the conviction of Alan. However, our efforts to bring anybody else who has played a part in this conspiracy to justice will continue. Because I think we owe Carol that.
Investigation this afternoon after the body of a popular local DJ was discovered in a secluded country lane.
It was obviously a really ferocious attack.
11 slash wounds and 10 stab wounds to different parts of his body.
A grieving community hunt for those responsible when a vulnerable adult is viciously killed.
Most people sort of couldn't believe it.
I never thought that anything like that would happen around these parts.
My suspicions were that there was something more to this. Something related to drugs or some other kind of criminal fallout.
He couldn't see bad in people. That's the problem with Michael. He thinks everybody's like him.
Perched on top of the White Cliffs of Dover lies the picturesque village of Capel-le-Fern.
Capel is a really idyllic, friendly neighbourhood. It's the kind of place where you can leave your door open. It's a really safe place to live. The most exciting thing that happens here is the chickens escaping.
It's just a lovely village. Just countryside, go out with the dogs and people say hello.
There's a pub, community centre, a caravan park. It's popular with dog walkers and holiday makers walking across the White Cliffs.
Everyone knows each other, more elderly people than young. There's not really any crime.
10 minutes along the coast lies Aycliffe, a small hamlet next to the port of Dover, where the Kerr family, along with 30-year-old aspiring DJ Michael, call home.
Michael was butter wouldn't melt in his mouth sort of person. He would be very jovial, very jokey. I always knew him growing up. We all played together. Always a funny little guy. If he'd done anything wrong, if he misbehaved, he just gave you his smile and that was it.
Michael always managed to make his family laugh, not least his mother Patricia.
He was mischievous, funny, just a normal child.
he would be naughty and you'd try and tell him off, but he'd have this cheeky grin.
But Michael almost never made it into the world.
When Michael was born, his birth was very quick. And then a few hours later, the doctor came out and he said, your baby's a very poorly boy. There's only a 30% chance that he will survive the night.
Whilst Michael did make it through the night, doctors diagnosed him with Fragile X syndrome.
Michael was diagnosed when he was 6 with Fragile X syndrome. When he was 9, the doctors at Guy's Hospital dismissed Fragile X chromosome syndrome. So we've never known what was wrong with him. I'm convinced that it was cerebral palsy. I'm convinced of it.
His brain would function just as normal, but his body was just that much slower. But to us, he was Michael. He didn't have a condition. He was just Michael.
He never held him back. The doctors told me he would never walk. And just after his 3rd birthday, he ran across the room. Then they said he'd never ride a bike. So I got him buy him a bike. And I can't remember how old he was when he started riding his bike, but there was no looking back once he got on that bike.
As Michael grew older, he developed a passion for music and parties, and became a DJ in local pubs and clubs.
As we were growing up, sort of going to parties and discos and things like that, Michael would always sort of he would like to be the music man. He was the DJ.
As long as Michael loved it, he would play it. Anything and everything his mixes would be, and it would be like maybe Celine Dion going into Erasure, going into something else, and that's just how he was. But he loved it, and you could see he loved it, and that's what was lovely about Michael.
Whilst Michael loved being on the decks, his true passion was being behind the wheel.
As he started to get a bit older, he went towards his car. He'd done his driving lessons. Took him quite a while, bless him, but he passed, he'd done it, he passed.
And the day he passed, you think he'd won the lottery. Absolutely would think he'd won the lottery. He was so made up that he'd passed.
The car that Michael had was like a goldy coloured Renault Clio, and it was his pride and joy. He loved it. I think he probably loved that car more than he did himself.
Michael was always keen to show off his pride and joy, and was known for giving locals a lift home from Dover when the pubs closed.
When Michael passed his test, he just didn't drink, so he was always about, if he'd be outside, if the club finished, he'd be outside of his car. It just led on from there. Anyone want to lift home? He always wanted to make sure that, especially girls, if there's any girls, that they got home okay, because getting a taxi late at night in Dover could become impossible. He never done it for any financial gains. He never done it for anything. It would put petrol in the car, and it meant he could be driving still. So he loved and lived for driving.
And I think that's where Michael's popularity came from, I think. Meeting people, new friends, he would offer them lifts home, just literally out of kindness of his heart. He would always make sure that people were safe because of his niceness and how he was with people, really.
But in the spring of 2013, everything changed.
Kent police have launched a probe after a body was discovered in the village of Capel-le-Fern. Police say the body of a 30-year-old man was discovered on a secluded country lane at around 1 p.m. this afternoon.
So when the police officers turned up, they saw immediately at the end of the lane, they could see Michael lying motionless a few metres away from his car. So this is the location where Michael Kerr was found. When I arrived here, Michael was lying here, face up, and just over here was a significant pooling of blood. It was clear that it was a homicide investigation. He had significant injuries to his neck, which he couldn't have done himself. His neck was open, and it also looked as if he'd been potentially moved or dragged. There was blood splatter within the car as well. And we discovered 2 of his teeth under his body. It was obviously a really ferocious attack.
But what had led to the popular DJ being murdered in such a brutal way? Had he picked up the wrong person? Could this have been a robbery that had gone tragically wrong? Or did Michael unwittingly stumble upon people up to no good?
My suspicions were that there was something more to this.
Locals in the coastal village of Capel-le-Fern are waking up to news of a brutal murder.
The body of 30-year-old DJ Michael Kerr was found on Satmar Lane earlier this afternoon. Police are appealing for any information into the attack.
I did wake up with this sick feeling in my stomach on the 10th. I've got this nervous feeling that something's going to happen. And then there was a knock at my door. And I remember seeing this woman standing there, and she asked if I was Michael's mum. And I said, yeah, what's he done? And then she just said, I'm sorry.
We was actually, as a family, we're down at the little holiday village about half-hour away. And Michael was supposed to come down and join us that day. My phone lit up with hundreds of missed phone calls and messages from my friend, who then informed me that Michael had died. She then went on to tell me that he'd been attacked and believed that he'd been stabbed.
Obviously, at first, I didn't want to believe it was Michael. I kept saying to myself, no, it can't be Michael. It can't be. It's not going to be Michael. Why would anybody do this to Michael? He's everybody's friend. Everybody loves Michael. It can't be him. Can't be him. And then as the evening went on, it came out that it was Michael, and yeah, that's how I found out.
News of this horrific attack soon spreads across the quiet coastal village.
I woke up and there were police everywhere. I felt sick, I felt disgusted, and I couldn't understand why someone would do what they did.
You know, most people sort of couldn't believe it. A lot of the older people were a little bit unsettled. You know, anyone that lived near something like that would be. It was a shock to the system. You know, I mean, you don't expect anything like that here. It's such a quiet place.
Kent police work immediately to preserve the crime scene.
We cordoned off the scene. We had the car that needed to be examined. And then, because of the seriousness of the case, we actually organised for a pathologist to come to the scene and do an assessment of the scene and take samples of the scene. That's really unusual. That very rarely happens, only on the most serious cases. But actually, he couldn't arrive until the next day. And the weather was awful that night. We had wind and we had rain, and this is on top of the cliffs, so it's really open. We had a tent that was set up, and the officer did a fantastic job protecting him before taking Michael to the mortuary.
We went to see him, and he was covered up with this purple tape. And I remember saying to him, "You've got my most favourite colour wrapped round you." And I remember laying over him, and I felt him move. And in that second, I just thought, I was going to be fine. He's going to wake up.
The crime scene is contained, and the search for anything which points to Michael's murderer begins.
What was obvious from the initial search is that his mobile phone was missing and not found. His wallet was intact though, so there was no obvious sort of sign that it might be a robbery.
With the robbery ruled out, detectives speculate whether Michael's phone holds vital information about his attacker.
My suspicions were that there was something more to this. I was really suspicious. I didn't know whether it was a fallout over drugs and drug dealing. So when we first turned up, the car was actually wedged up against the bank as if it had been driven up the bank, which went with something obviously bad going on, whether it's somebody trying to get away or something.
The evidence points towards the driver trying to take Michael's car to make a hasty escape. The question is, what was Michael doing in such a secluded location?
There was no relatives or no friends of Michael's to be lived anywhere near that area. There was no family he would have been seeing. No reason that Michael would have been there. He was just there because he was lured there.
With little reason for Michael to be at Satmar Lane, suspicions grow within the local community.
So Dover is obviously a major travel hub. It has the port. It's a major thoroughfare across the channel. And Aycliffe is to the west of the town. It's very close to a lorry park. a lot of transient people coming and going, lorry drivers, travellers, tourists. So the idea that Michael Kerr could have been killed by someone just passing through was quite suggestible.
Detectives need to keep an open mind. They reach out to the people that knew Michael well to help build a profile of his movements that could lead to the attacker.
Michael Kerr is a 30-year-old guy. He's got a learning disability. He was actually well known locally. Quite often he'd be seen driving around with friends, giving people lifts home from nightclubs. He was a genuinely, overtly helpful guy, trusting, potentially too trusting.
Yeah, I think he did want to be everybody's mate, and a lot of people took advantage of that. Some people not in necessarily a good way. And if it meant making friends, then he was vulnerable. And he'd give people his money and give them lifts everywhere.
Which is what he always done nearly every day since he had the car, to help people out. And he wouldn't not help people out.
He couldn't see the bad in people. That's the problem with Michael. He can't see the bad in people. He thinks everybody's like him.
With the murder happening at night in such a rural area, the investigation turns to the local community. Could there be witnesses to Michael's death?
We went door to door to see whether anyone had heard anything that happened at that time of night, because it's so rural, then maybe they would have heard. And actually there was somebody at premises about 100 metres away who did say to us that they heard some sort of shouts and screaming, but it sounded more sort of laughing and screaming and people messing around more than anything else, and that was it.
With the latest information from family and locals, detectives begin to wonder. Had Michael naively offered a lift to his killer? Was it a friend or a stranger? As the post-mortem begins, it's apparent whoever it was carried out an horrific attack.
Mr. Kerr's injuries are almost all sharp force injuries, so we're talking about a bladed article. The most obvious injuries that Mr. Kerr sustained were 21 sharp force injuries, 11 slash wounds where the knife had been drawn across the skin, and 10 stab wounds to different parts of his body where the knife had been stabbed in. He also had a couple of teeth knocked out. There was a distinct lack of defensive injuries on Mr. Kerr. That would suggest that he was overcome very suddenly, overpowered very quickly, and potentially started to lose blood and lose consciousness so quickly that he simply didn't have the opportunity to respond.
From the evidence from the pathologist, it's clear that this was a very, very sustained attack. So it wasn't a matter of seconds. This would have taken minutes to carry out.
The immediate thing that springs to mind with that number of injuries is it is more than you need to kill somebody. So this is into what some of the psychologists would call overkill. This is not just ending someone's life. This is far in excess of what's necessary to do that.
With the cause of death established, the race is on to find the murder weapon before vital evidence that would point towards the killer could be lost.
From the scene here, it's a narrow single-track lane that runs for about a mile or so up to the A20. So we had dozens of officers searching, 20 or 30 metres either side, all the way along, which took a number of days. So there's also a pond which we had officers forensically searching throughout.
The police, divers and that, they was all over here, going under the water, dredging it. I mean, they was in there days, just trying to find anything.
Having combed the hedgerows and surrounding fields, police finally uncover a potential lead.
Michael's mobile phone was missing, but we found on the surface of the lane, his phone was smashed. It looked like it'd been thrown on the floor and stamped on, and then kicked into the hedge.
With the phone sent for data analysis, their next priority is to find the murder weapon.
We didn't find anything in the ponds, but it's when we got onto the main road, I made the decision to search all of the storm drains. On the main road, there are 200 drains, and we got help from the local authority to suck out the stuff in the drains, and we found 2 knives.
With multiple knives discovered, police have to consider the possibility there could be more than one killer. Had Michael been subjected to a group attack? And if so, what was the motive? But as police start to consider that theory, there's a breakthrough.
Detectives investigating the murder of local DJ Michael Kerr have made a number of arrests in Dover today. 5 people were taken into custody and detained for questioning in what has become a major investigation.
A police officer actually had a telephone call from somebody to say something like, you need to come and speak to them. And then police turned up at the address.
5 people are arrested at the house in Dover. All suspects are believed to be locals in their 20s.
All the suspects were known to each other. They were living together in the same house. They were all arrested on suspicion of the murder of Michael Kerr. It would have been a shock to the local community. A lot of questions. Who are they? And are they a danger to other people in the communities?
In the small village of Capel-le-Fern on the Kent coast, police are investigating the murder of Michael Kerr and have arrested a group of people all living in the same house.
It would have been a shock to the local community. A lot of questions to be answered. Who are they? How could they have done this? What was the reason behind it? And are they a danger to other people in the communities?
While the police question the group of suspects, Michael's community rallied together to celebrate his life and memory.
The whole community, I think, was just in shock as to why anybody would want to hurt Michael. The way the community got together, just for the remembrance of Michael, really, a few days after was astonishing. It was something you'd see of a movie or something, you know. It's like literally the whole of Dover came together for Michael, basically, literally just for Michael.
All of a sudden, there's just what felt like thousands of Chinese lanterns went up from the seafront. It was an amazing sight. You know, and I remember standing there. God, all that for my boy. Who knew?
Despite the beautiful send-off for Michael, the interrogation of the 5 suspects in connection with his death continues.
The guys were well known to the police for varying different things. I was really suspicious that there was something going on.
All 5 suspects are questioned by the police. There's shocking news. 3 of the 5 suspects are released, but the 2 that remain in custody are women. One of them is 22-year-old Alicia Davis.
We presented with these 2 young ladies who've got no criminal records previously. Alicia Davis was an air cadet. Comes from I'll argue, a reasonable background.
Also in custody is 21-year-old Charlotte Coulson. The pair met each other through the local nightlife scene in Dover and have been living together for nearly 6 months.
Charlotte Coulson was very good friends with Alicia Davis, and the pair of them were both very heavy drinkers and were well known in the area.
These girls are living a bit of a party lifestyle. They're constantly looking for drink, constantly looking for opportunity to have fun.
What detectives need to know is how the women knew Michael, and were they involved in his death?
Charlotte Coulson said that she met Michael a year or so before in the clubbing scene within Dover. He'd be around. He was known as a gentle guy that was probably trying to sort of find a girlfriend, trying to befriend people. She'd had lifts from him before. She'd had lifts back from nightclubs, also occasionally to take her to the supermarket, that sort of thing. And it was actually only over recent weeks that Alicia got introduced to him.
I've seen Michael a couple of times with them in the car, and occasion a week before I've seen Michael with one of them in the car get out of his car and go into the shop and buy some alcohol.
As the police interview both women under caution, there's a revelation when they both admit to meeting Michael twice on the day he died.
They gave pretty consistent accounts in interviews. They've then described what has then happened.
They both describe that at 8 o'clock in the evening, Michael picks up Alicia Davis and takes her to Satmar Lane in Capel-le-Fern. Here they park up for some time before Michael then drives her back to Dover, buying her alcohol before dropping her home. The women spend the evening drinking, but just after midnight, Michael returns to their house.
Michael Kerr picked them up and they went for a drive to Satmar Lane.
Michael parks in the same spot he and Alicia Davis were at earlier in the evening.
Charlotte was in the back, Michael and Alicia were in the front.
What Alicia Davis says next turns the investigation on its head.
What Alicia Davis was saying is that she was attacked and raped by Michael. And she then defended herself. She put her hands down the side of the seat and found a knife and went to the only area of flesh that she could see, which is the throat, where she stabbed him.
With Davis claiming she attacked to defend herself, Charlotte's account is crucial.
She said she was asleep in the back of the car and she woke up to a commotion where Alicia was actually attacking him.
According to Coulson, she'd been asleep in the back and couldn't do anything about it, couldn't stop it after it had begun, and was trapped in the back seat and couldn't get out of the car either.
Charlotte Coulson then gave a very confused description about how they both got out of the car, and they then moved Michael's body, tried to drive off. So that explains the position of the car. When we found it, she said they stalled it and couldn't get it working, which is why they then decided to walk back to Dover.
With Davis claiming she stabbed Michael in self-defence, and Coulson adamant she was not involved, simply a bystander at the scene, the police need to examine the evidence to establish if their defences could in fact be the truth.
There was quite a lot of work for us to do, and certainly not making any presumptions, because for two young ladies not known to police before, no evidence of violence, to go from nothing to not just harming, killing somebody, but ferocious attack, that just did not make sense.
In their search for the truth, police obtained CCTV evidence from the local area.
I let them know that I had CCTV and people were on CCTV.
It was actually a premises close by that we got CCTV from that showed the vehicle going past, which enabled us to time when they turned up at the scene. We also were able to get some information from telephone analysis of phone, so it all tied up to the early hours of the 10th of April.
By comparing CCTV and telephone mass data, detectives are able to confirm Michael's car arrived in Capel-le-Fern shortly after 2 a.m. But when they examine both suspects' phones, they uncover some crucial information that throws the girls' version of events into serious question.
We used some techniques to recover some deleted messages, some messages that we know that were definitely deleted, that timed at exactly the time that the CCTV showed that the car arrived. And there's an exchange between Coulson and Davis by text message, whilst clearly Michael is driving to the end, basically saying, "Go now, do it now." And Davis responding to Coulson to say, "No, I can't, you're going to have to start." And then a message back saying, "Right, let's do it, let's go." And then a text message saying, "Let's party." And this is within 3 minutes of passing the CCTV and being in that area. So that in itself is then indicating that they planned it. And both girls are involved in it, which goes against Coulson, who's then trying to say, "Well, I was asleep in the back. You know, my mate did it."
Police believe the text messages prove Michael's death wasn't in self-defence, but a well-planned attack. And the 2 knives discovered on the route the girls would have walked home raises even more doubt.
Their defence was that he had raped Alicia Davis and that she happened to discover a knife. Taking that with the knives that we recovered from the drain, when we compared the knives to knives in the premises in Dover, there were 2 knife sets. These knives were the ones that were missing from the knife sets. So the girls took the knives with them. This isn't I found the knife and I'm protecting myself because he's raping me. They've planned to murder him.
A further search of the women's house uncovers more evidence.
We later discover that there's a fire in the back garden. And we find what looks like clothing that's been set alight. The others in the premises say that when they came home, they started putting clothes in the washing machine, but it was burnt clothing we were then able to match to them wearing before the event. The act of burning the clothes, was sufficient for us to get a charge.
With all the evidence pointing away from the claim of self-defence, Alicia Davis and Charlotte Coulson are charged with Michael Kerr's murder.
A lot of people were shocked. 2 young females. Anyone in their right mind would be, sort of amazed that they could do something.
The 21-year-old and the 22-year-old with no previous convictions or knowledge to police. Why did they kill Michael?
22-year-old Alicia Davis and 21-year-old Charlotte Coulson have been charged with the murder of aspiring DJ Michael Kerr. But the question on everyone's lips is, why would 2 girls with no criminal backgrounds kill a man in such a brutal way?
Today, the trial of 2 young women is set to begin in central London for the murder of a 30-year-old man in the village of Capel-le-Fern, Dover.
With both girls pleading not guilty, the horrific details of Michael's death are to be laid bare in court.
The trial was actually moved out of Kent. There was a decision made because of the local interest and the seriousness of the case that it was allocated to the Old Bailey.
In December 2013, the trial into Michael's murder begins in central London, and his family come face to face with his alleged killers.
They both were brought in, sat in their separate spaces in the court, heads down, didn't look up, didn't acknowledge anybody, just kept their heads down.
They would be sat there laughing and joking, but as soon as the judge and jury came in, they would sit there with their heads down, behave themselves. And I didn't know I was capable of hating somebody as much as I hated. They showed no remorse, nothing, absolutely nothing.
As the trial begins, both Davis and Coulson plead that they acted in self-defence.
The accusations they made against Michael just showed how evil they were. They planned this, they done it, they took his life and they tried to get away with it by making up the most horrendous, hideous lie about Michael.
I know that he wouldn't have done anything wrong to them. There was allegations made against Michael which were complete and utter, shot down, utter nonsense. So no, I don't know or can think of any reason why they would have wanted to do it. Just out of pure evil.
No matter how much they prepared us for it, when you hear what they're saying in their interviews in that courtroom, and you hear the accusations about my son, nothing prepares you for that.
Key to the prosecution's case is establishing that Alicia Davis's version of events were not true.
It was alleged that Michael Kerr had tried to rape Alicia in the car. So Alicia had acted in self-defence by stabbing him multiple times.
To disprove Alicia's defence, we actually took the gold Clio to the Old Bailey, parked it in the rear yard, and the judge and the jury all came out to inspect it. We thought that was really important because when she describes what happened with him effectively undressing and then undressing her in the act of rape, you only have to look at the car and the size of the car on the inside to say that couldn't possibly happen. Even 3 people in it would have been quite tight.
New evidence revealed in court further questions their defence.
Another thing that we discovered later is that there were actually text messages on Charlotte Coulson's phone to Michael after he was dead to say why haven't you come to pick us up? Why we haven't heard from you? Clearly trying to misdirect the police investigation to say, well, we never saw him.
She tried to establish a false alibi, which is quite a cynical move after the murder, to try and make it seem as if she thought that he was still alive.
As the trial progresses, further information as to why the defendants met with Michael that day comes to light.
Alicia Davis actually admitted earlier that she had had sex with Michael for money. Charlotte Coulson said she's the one that actually had organised for Alicia to have sex with him for money. They needed £20 to pay for alcohol.
Charlotte Coulson virtually pimped out her friend, Alicia, to go and have sex with Michael. It seemed like an awful lot of money. It's essentially beer money for them. But it seems that Alicia agreed to that.
Finally, the court is presented with a possible motive for the brutal killing.
On the face of it, the girls are worried that they've prostituted Alicia to get money for alcohol, and that Michael, as a vulnerable adult, now thinks that he's got a girlfriend in a relationship. So is the only motivation then to stop that happening? Instead of saying, no, that's not what it is, Michael, to actually lure him in and kill him.
They egged each other on. They drank very, very heavily. And from there, they decide to perhaps teach him a lesson, to punish him.
Still, Coulson maintains she wasn't involved in the vicious attack, and that Alicia Davis acted alone. But having discovered 2 knives, the court hears damning evidence which suggests a different story.
With stab wounds, like with any other sort of wound, you're looking at where they are, how deep they are, what angle they're going in at. The injuries were widely distributed on Mr. Kerr's body, so they're not all focused in one place. If they're all over his body, if the injuries are slightly different in different places, it's suggesting more than one assailant.
The judge's view later was that Charlotte Coulson was just as involved, and actually probably because of the position of the wounds on the neck, that they were from behind. That Charlotte pulled his hair, pulled his chin back, and slashed his throat a number of times. And the injuries are horrific. The stab to the chest by Alicia that she's admitted, there's evidence that she took the knife partially out of his chest and moved the position of it to make sure that she hit his heart. I mean, that comes across with such callousness, the extreme of violence from where you wouldn't expect it, is just incredible.
After murdering Michael in cold blood, the court hears how Davis and Coulson went on to enjoy the rest of their night.
Police found CCTV evidence from after the murder, which showed they'd gone to McDonald's and bought booze, which perhaps suggested that they'd taken money from Michael after they'd killed him as well. And we know also people witnessed hearing the girls laughing and joking as they returned back to their home. So it just shows the callousness that they regarded what they'd done.
I've dealt with many, many murders over the years, and this is up there. For girls with nothing in their background that indicates that they would go down a path of criminality, it just does not make sense.
They were both very heavy drinkers. They had a bit of a toxic friendship. And I think it would be too simple an explanation to say they did it for a couple of pounds for the price of a McDonald's. But together, they proved to be an absolutely deadly combination.
After a grueling 3-week trial, the jury returns its verdict. Both Alicia Davis and Charlotte Coulson are found guilty of murder. Davis is sentenced to life, with a minimum of 25 years. Coulson is sentenced to life, and a minimum of 20 years.
It is closure in a way. It's closure that Michael's got his justice, but it still will never be enough in my eyes. It will never be enough.
They both should have got longer. I don't know much about prison, only what I've seen on television. I really hope they're not having an easy time. I hope they're not having an easy time.
I don't think people can change if there's evil in those people like that. There wasn't just one attack, there was two people doing a vicious attack on him. So they should pay for it with their lives.
So many people have said, a life for a life. I don't want that. No, I don't want them to die. Because in my head, every night when those lights are out, they see and they hear and they are haunted by what they've done to my boy. And it torments them.
Eight years after Michael's passing, his friends and family are slowly coming to terms with life without him.
The fact is now we can smile and laugh and remember Mike for who he was and what he meant to us, rather than the way that he was taken. Just the biggest smile, absolutely loving life. Love him to bits and miss him completely.
I think what happened to Michael shook the whole community, and I don't think Michael realised how loved he was.
Life stops for you. The world still revolves for everybody else. But it doesn't revolve for you. But I was told once that I've got to let him go. I've got to let go of the anger, I've got to let go of the pain, I've got to let him go. I can't. I don't want the pain to go because I'm scared that if the pain goes, he goes. And all while I've got the pain, I've got him. I don't know if that's normal, but that's how I feel.